Rick and Morty is full of interesting and mysterious characters, and when we talk about such characters, it is a crime if we don't mention Diane Sanchez, who is the deceased wife of Rick Sanchez and the mother of Beth Sanchez. She is one of the most fascinating characters, and ever since her debut, she was always one of the hottest topics of discussion among fans, and today I want to talk about her. But before starting, I want to ask you all to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more. I hope you all have a great day. Now let's start the video. Well, for a really long time, the identity of Rick's wife and Beth's mother was ambiguous due to the nature of the flashback in the Rick Champ Redemption.
True, but you can alter anything you want about a totally fabricated origin story.
The manner in which Rick denies being driven by a totally fabricated backstory led many to conclude that the entire flashback was a ruse to fool his interrogator, indicating that the cause of Diane's passing, nay, even her name, would remain ambiguous. However, in the first episode of the 5th season, Diane is referenced by Mr. Nimbus, to which Rick angrily shoots it down as him establishing a canonical backstory.
If Diane were alive today, what would she
Don't
think?
fucking establish canonical backstory with me, you red
Rick Mariah Jack, the final episode of that season, eventually revealed the entire story was true, and the fabricated part was how Rick came up with the portal fluid formula. Dan Harmon admitted he always felt the Shoney's revelation was Rick's true backstory, but avoided confirming it in the Rick Shank Redemption because he thought it was too early in the show's run to be imposing canon. Very little has been discussed about Diane, even by the series' creators. Harmon has said it on multiple occasions that she was unremarkable, later suggesting she was more comparable to Jerry, and that this was connected to Beth's idolization of Rick. Diane Sanchez was a fair-skinned woman. She had blonde hair and prominent lips, as well as several freckles on her face. The only outfit she's been shown in so far depicts her as wearing a pale blue blouse with white jeans. We don't really know what kind of personality she had, but in the Solar Ricks episode, Rick said that Summer reminded him a lot of Diana, which could imply that their personalities were similar. Not much has been revealed about what her relationship with Rick was actually like due to conflicting statements over the course of the series. However, it can be discerned that they had a happy marriage, as shown in the only partially fabricated flashback in the Rick Champ Redemption. Mr. Nimbus appears to have known Rick long enough to at least know who Diane is, although it is unclear if he actually knew her. However, Rick's marriage to Diane was tragically cut short when Rick Prime got annoyed at Rick's refusal to explore the universe like other Ricks, murdered Diane and an infant Beth using an explosive that destroyed Rick's house. As shown in Rick Mariah Jack, Rick spent the next several decades of his life systematically murdering various Ricks across the multiverse, trying to find the one who took his wife and child away from him. However, he was unsuccessful in this endeavor, and after founding the Citadel, he decided his best bet was to instead settle down in the dimension the other Rick came from. Since that Rick had abandoned his family, Rick reasoned he could give them the relief of having him back in their lives, while also allowing him to wait for that Rick to return so he could finally have his revenge. As revealed in Solar Ricks, at some point over the years, Rick created an AI version of Diane to haunt him at his old house in Dimension C-137. This AI would always sound like she was calling him from the other room, and would constantly remind Rick of his failure to save her and urge him to get revenge on her and Beth's mother. Rick re-encountered this AI when he was returned to the dimension after trying to reset his portal fluid, where he declared it was time for him to move on from her and Beth's deaths, as he now had a family in a different dimension to care for. However, the AI Diane reminded him that the Rick who murdered her would also have been affected by Rick's portal fluid error, thus returning to the Cronenberg dimension. Rick nearly started his revenge quest once more, but was talked out of it by Morty, unaware that the Diane AI had been correct. So, we know that Diana, who was killed by Rick Prime, was from Rick C-137's dimension, which led to also the death of Beth Sanchez. After that, Rick went to the Cronenberg universe where Beth is alive, which means that Rick Prime hasn't killed her and her mother. Could this mean that Diane Sanchez is still alive in that universe and that there is a possibility of her meeting Rick again? Well, I would love to see that happening, but I guess that it is impossible. Unfortunately, the pilot episode confirms that she is at least deceased, based on Rick's remark that Beth's mother would have loved the breakfast she cooked. Comments by Rick in Rick Potion number 9 and the Wedding Squanchers suggest that in these dimensions her marriage with Rick was considerably less happy due to the Rick's self-destructive attitudes. Rick characterizes it as a failing marriage in the former episode and remarks, "I couldn't make a marriage work and I can turn a black hole into a sun" in the latter. At the conclusion of autoerotic assimilation, Beth insists to Rick that she could never sacrifice her family's safety just to keep him in her life. At this point, Beth realizes that she sounds like her mother, suggesting that Diane valued her family's safety over Rick's scientific experiments. But still, even if Diane wasn't alive in that universe, Rick could try finding a universe where she is alive, just like how she did with Beth. Why did he not move into the dimension where Diane was alive? Well, I feel like he has tried to make it work with several Diane copies, and it always failed because Diane most likely didn't want anything to do with the guy who abandoned her and her child. Failed marriages would explain why Rick was so resentful to marriages in general. Also, why would we expect a guy who is so tortured that he created a haunting voice of his dead wife to remind him he needs to avenge her to just go find another wife who isn't his wife? Rick is a guy who cares, and it's pretty obvious that he doesn't believe every member of his infinite family is the same as the one he lost, even if he says otherwise. The first episode of the 6th season pretty much literally said that. Rick cares about his new family because they went through thick and thin together, not because they are another version of his dead/could-have-been family. One very logical question arises: why doesn't Rick use time travel to save Diane C-137? It is hinted but never confirmed that Rick C-137 may have tried to use time travel to go back in time to Diane, but this is just a subtle hint. In the 10th episode of the first season, in the scene where Rick's mind is scanned, there is a woman pictured in a memory sequence that looks like Diane but with a single strange eye popping out of her face. If we look at Rick's garage closely, we can see that he has a box which is labeled as time travel stuff, and in that box we can see that almost identical eye arises. Maybe he went back in time to meet Diane again, but for some reason she was transformed into an alien parasite being. This could be such a traumatizing event for Rick that ever since that day he became strongly against time travel stuff. Also, the second episode of the 4th season features a Matrix reference, where Rick keeps the bodies of disliked people in tube-like containers with liquid, maintaining them in dream worlds. The Matrix, a movie where our current society is living in a dream-like world held captive on an alien spaceship. If we look at some of the other members, one of them strangely looks familiar. A woman with light blonde hair, pale skin, and has a huge resemblance to Diane Sanchez. However, if we look at her face closely, we can see that she doesn't really have a humanoid face, unlike the second female who is shown to her right. This makes me think that the character who is in that container is that parasite who embodied Diane Sanchez while Rick went back to the past. However, despite being a parasite, she was still Diane Sanchez, Rick's true love, and he couldn't kill her. That's why he keeps her there. Why doesn't Rick C-137 go to find another Diane? Essentially, he just doesn't want to, preferring instead to focus on revenge. In fact, he created an AI version of Diane to haunt him at his old house in Dimension C-137 and constantly reminded Rick of his failure to save her and urge him to get revenge on her and Beth's murder. Maybe if Rick C-137 kills Rick Prime, he eventually will give himself permission to be happy and find another Diane, one who has just had her Rick killed. But would this really make Rick happy? That Diane would be old like Rick at this point. Sure, maybe Rick could make himself and her young again, maybe, but Rick has said many times that he is not a believer in romantic love and long-term attachment. There is a reason why Diane hasn't showed up in the series yet, and I don't think that it will change. If she reappeared, I think it will be the end of the series. I don't know why, but I feel like her comeback in the series would ruin Rick's character, who got such a massive development and uniqueness because of the traumatic experience that was caused by the loss of his wife. Anyway, I guess this is all for today. What do you think? Will Diane ever appear in the series? If she did, under what circumstances would that happen? Let me know in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more. Lonnie Bro out. Bye.